Billionaire's son pours hot coffee on Waitress. Didn't see the Korean Mafia boss and his K9 behind him watching. The scalding coffee splashed across her uniform, soaking through the thin fabric and burning the skin beneath. Shayla's scream cut through the upscale cafe like a knife, silencing conversations and clinking silverware in an instant. She dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face as blisters already began forming on her trembling hands. And Alexander Wang laughed. He actually laughed as he stood over her, designer shoes just inches from where she knelt in agony. His Italian silk shirt probably cost more than 3 months of her salary. His watch more than a year's rent for the tiny apartment she shared with her younger siblings. And he was laughing, pointing his phone camera at her pain like it was entertainment created for his amusement. "That's what happens when you spill water on my sleeve, you stupid bitch," he sneered, his voice carrying throughout the now silent cafe. "Maybe next time you'll be more careful." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The other waitstaff froze in place, eyes downcast, knowing intervention meant losing the jobs they desperately needed. The wealthy patrons studied their phones or menus with sudden fascination, pretending they hadn't witnessed assault in broad daylight. In this glittering cafe in the financial district, Alexander Wang was untouchable royalty, the son of tech billionaire Victor Wang, a man whose wealth had long ago placed him above such trivial concerns as law or basic human decency. But in the corner booth, something shifted. A Korean man in an impeccable charcoal suit carefully set down his teacup. The movement was unhurried, deliberate, the gesture of someone accustomed to controlling every aspect of his environment. At his feet, a massive black Jindo dog rose silently, muscles rippling beneath its sleek coat. The dog made no sound, no growl, no bark, but its eyes tracked Alexander with predatory focus. The man's face betrayed nothing as he observed the scene. His expression remained perfectly neutral, but his eyes changed. Something ancient and dangerous flickered behind them, a cold calculation that spoke of violence seen and violence delivered. Jin Wukong had watched enough. And Alexander Wang had just made the worst mistake of his privileged life. If this story resonates with you, please hit that subscribe button now. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Let's see how many brave souls will follow this journey to its conclusion. ***. Jin Wukong had not come to America to become what he now was. 20 years ago, he'd arrived with nothing but military training from Korea's special forces and dreams of legitimate business success. The American dream, they called it. Work hard, play by the rules, achieve prosperity. What a beautiful lie that had proven to be. He'd learned quickly that for immigrants like him, the rules were different. The system had sharp teeth for those without connections, without inherited wealth, without the right background or family name. He'd adapted, survived, then thrived in the shadows between worlds. Now he controlled much of the West Coast's Korean business interests, both legal and otherwise. The Americans had a sanitized word for what he was: organized crime. In Korea, they call him Japuk, a leader in the complex network of Korean mafia operating with ruthless efficiency wherever Koreans settled abroad. But Jin Woo preferred a simpler term: justice bringer. Because when the system failed people, as it invariably did, Jin Woo ensured balance was restored. Phantom, his Jindo, had been trained in Seoul's elite military K9 program before being deemed too aggressive for standard service. Jin Woo saw not aggression but loyalty in the dog's eyes when he'd rescued him from euthanasia. Phantom understood what humans often fail to grasp. In this world, protection required the capacity for controlled violence. As Jin Woo stood, buttoning his suit jacket with a single practiced motion, his mind was already categorizing Alexander Wang. Third son of tech magnate Victor Wang, Harvard dropout, Instagram celebrity, a young man whose existence was defined by extravagant displays of wealth and casual cruelty. His file in Jin Woo's mental catalog was thick with incidents whispered about but never prosecuted. Sexual assault allegations settled quietly, drunk driving charges mysteriously disappearing, even rumors of a hit and run covered up by his father's influence. Wang was 27 years old and had never faced consequences for anything in his life. Shayla was still on her knees, one of her co-workers finally rushing to help her up. Jinwoo recognized her now. She had been serving in this cafe for almost a year, always polite, efficient, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. Jinwoo knew that smile. It was the smile of someone who had learned to make herself small, unthreatening, invisible. The smile of someone who couldn't afford to offend. Now she was weeping silently as her angry red skin blistered under the bright cafe lights. "Call an ambulance," Jinwoo said, his voice carrying across the room despite its measured tone. His accent was still present after 2 decades in America, and he made no effort to hide it. "She needs medical attention." Alexander Wang turned, irritation flashing across his handsome face at this interruption to his performance. "Mind your own business," he snapped, looking Jinwoo over with the dismissive assessment of someone born to judge others by their usefulness to him. Finding the Korean man lacking, he turned away. "She's fine. She's just being dramatic for a bigger tip." Jinwoo took 3 steps forward. Phantom moved with him, a silent shadow at his heel. "I said, she needs medical attention," Jinwoo repeated, now standing directly in Shayla's line of sight. His voice softened. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" Shayla's eyes widened in recognition. Not of Jinwoo personally, but of something rare. Genuine concern in a place where she'd received none. She shook her head slightly, whispering that she couldn't afford an ambulance, couldn't miss work, couldn't risk losing her job that helped support her brother's college tuition and her grandmother's medical bills. Alexander laughed again, the entitled chuckle of someone who found other people's struggles inherently amusing. "Look at this. Some foreigner thinks he's some kind of hero," Alexander said loudly to his companions, who dutifully snickered. "Why don't you take your dog and go back to wherever you came from?" Jinwoo didn't react to the ignorant taunts. He simply turned to face Alexander, meeting his eyes directly for the first time. The younger man's smirk faltered momentarily under that gaze. Something in Jinwoo's eyes, the absolute stillness in them, the complete absence of fear or deference, triggered an instinctive alarm in Alexander's brain. "You assaulted this woman," Jinwoo said calmly. "You will pay for her medical treatment. You will apologize. And you will compensate her for lost wages." The cafe had gone utterly silent. No one had ever spoken to Alexander Wang like this, with authority, with expectation of compliance. It was as foreign to him as respect for others. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Alexander recovered, incredulity replacing his momentary discomfort. Alexander Wang, 3rd son of Victor Wang. Net worth of approximately $8 million, though most of that is in a trust you cannot access without your father's approval. Jinwoo replied without hesitation. "Your car outside, the red Lamborghini with custom plates, is leased, not owned. You live in your father's downtown penthouse because you've been blacklisted by most luxury buildings for inappropriate behavior. You were asked to leave Harvard after a sexual assault allegation that your father paid $2 million to make disappear." Alexander's face had drained of color. "Who the fuck are you?" Jinwoo didn't answer. He simply pulled out his wallet and extracted a black credit card, handing it to the cafe manager who had finally approached. "Call an ambulance. Use this for the bill, and for any medical expenses she incurs." He turned to Shayla and added, "This man will not cost you your job or your health. You have my word." The cafe doors burst open as 3 large men in dark suits rushed in, Alexander's security detail, who had been waiting in the car outside. They quickly assessed the situation, moving toward their charge with professional efficiency. "Mr. Wang, is there a problem here?" The largest one asked, positioning himself between Alexander and Jinwoo. Jinwoo didn't move. Neither did Phantom. The dog hadn't made a sound, but its posture had shifted subtly, weight balanced on its haunches. ready. "This guy is threatening me," Alexander said, confidence returning with his security present. "Get rid of him." The head security man sized up Jin Woo, taking in the perfect cut of his suit, his composed demeanor, and the unusually disciplined dog at his side. Something in his professional assessment gave him pause. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," he said to Jin Woo, but without making any move to touch him. Jin Woo nodded once. "I was finished anyway." He turned back to Shayla. "My name is Jin Woo Kong. Here is my card. Call me when you are released from the hospital." As Jin Woo walked toward the door, Phantom at his heel, the cafe door opened again. 2 uniformed police officers entered, surveying the scene. "We received a call about an assault," the first officer said. The cafe manager looked nervously between Alexander and the officers. "There was a misunderstanding. A waitress spilled coffee." "She burned herself with coffee," Alexander corrected smoothly. "Clumsy. Nothing to see here, officers." The policemen recognized Alexander immediately. Of course they did. His face was on society pages, on billboards promoting his father's companies, on gossip sites documenting his exploits. "Mr. Wong, sir. Everything all right here?" The deference in the officer's tone was unmistakable. Jin Woo paused by the door, observing this exchange with cold assessment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and removed his phone. He dialed a number from memory and spoke briefly into it, his voice too low for others to hear. 30 seconds later, the lead officer's radio crackled. He listened, his expression changing from confusion to concern. He glanced at Jin Woo with new wariness. "Mr. Wong will need to take statements about this incident," he said, his tone now professionally neutral. "Are you kidding me? Do you know who my father is?" Alexander's voice rose in indignation. "Yes, sir, I do. But we still need to follow procedure." The officer's eyes flicked to Jin Woo again. Jin Woo allowed himself the smallest of smiles as he walked out the door, knowing that his reputation had just preceded him. The connection had been made. The officers now knew that Jin Woo Kong was not someone whose involvement could be ignored, even when a Wong was involved. As he climbed into his black Mercedes, Jin Woo heard Alexander's parting threat float through the cafe door. "You'll regret this, whoever you are. Nobody crosses me." Such hollow threats from a man who had never had to back up his words with action. Jin Woo had heard similar threats from men far more dangerous than this spoiled child. Most of those men were now dead or wished they were. This story is just beginning to unfold. If you believe the powerful should be held accountable, hit that like button now. Subscribe to see justice served in ways you never expected. Asterisk asterisk. The Wong family empire had not been built through innovation alone. Victor Wong, Alexander's father, had emigrated from Taiwan in the 1980s with legitimate technological brilliance, but also a ruthless understanding of power. His semiconductors revolutionized computing, but it was his willingness to crush competitors, exploit regulatory loopholes, and leverage political connections that built his $17 billion fortune. Jin Woo knew all of this because he made it his business to know everything about those who wielded power in his territory. Knowledge was survival. Knowledge was leverage. Knowledge was power of its own kind. What Jin Woo discovered in the days following the cafe incident, however, made his blood boil with a cold, focused rage he hadn't felt in years. The Wong Industries factory on the outskirts of the city employed predominantly working-class people, and those from marginalized communities, people desperate enough to accept punishing working conditions and substandard pay. People whose economic vulnerability made them easy targets for exploitation. People like Shayla. Shayla's burns were second degree across both hands and wrists. She would recover, but the doctor estimated at least 3 weeks before she could work again. Her younger sister Keisha had disappeared 6 months ago after filing a workplace complaint against Wong Industries, where she had been employed as a quality control inspector. The police had investigated perfunctorily before classifying Keisha as a runaway, suggesting she had probably moved to another city or was living with a boyfriend somewhere. Shayla didn't believe this. Neither did Jinwoo. They threatened her, Shayla told Jinwoo from her hospital bed, her bandaged hands resting uselessly on the white sheets. A man came to our apartment. He said she should withdraw her complaint about the chemicals making workers sick. She refused. Her voice broke. The next day, she didn't come home. Jinwoo sat beside her bed, perfectly still as he absorbed this information. Phantom lay at his feet, equally motionless but missing nothing. "Why didn't you go to the police with this information?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "The man who threatened her showed us a police badge," Shayla whispered. "He said they could plant drugs in our apartment, that they could arrest our little brother if we caused trouble. Our grandmother depends on us. We couldn't risk it." Jinwoo nodded once. It was an old tactic, using a family's vulnerability as leverage. He had seen it before, had experienced similar threats himself 2 decades ago, when his own parents and sister still lived outside Seoul. The difference was that Jinwoo had fought back, had built his own power base, had ensured that those who threatened his family learned the true meaning of consequences. This connection, this echo of his own past, sealed Alexander Wang's fate. It was no longer about coffee or burns or public humiliation. It was about a system that allowed the powerful to prey on the vulnerable without fear. It was about the Wangs of the world believing they owned the lives of people like Shayla and her sister. It was about drawing a line that even billionaires couldn't cross. Jinwoo had not built his organization to become what he despised. He had built it to protect those the system failed, to balance scales that were designed to remain perpetually unbalanced. He stood, adjusting his cuffs with precise movements. "I will find your sister," he told Shayla, "and I will ensure the Wangs never harm another person like this." "They're too powerful," Shayla whispered. "Everyone says Victor Wang owns half the city. The police, the judges, even some politicians." Jinwoo allowed himself a rare, cold smile. "I own the other half." As Jinwoo left the hospital, his phone buzzed with a message from his security team. Alexander Wang was hosting a party at his exclusive downtown club that night. The message included surveillance photos of Alexander arriving with an entourage, including several young women who looked barely legal, if that. Jinwoo studied the images, noting the excessive security, the particular way Alexander kept looking over his shoulder. The cafe incident had rattled him more than he would admit. Good. Fear was educational. Fear was the beginning of respect. But Jinwoo would not move against Alexander directly. Not yet. First, he needed to understand exactly how deep the Wang corruption went, how Keisha had disappeared, where Victor Wang's true vulnerabilities lay. He would be methodical. He would be thorough. He would be patient. The next morning, Alexander Wang found his precious Lamborghini missing from his secured parking garage. In its place was a single black dog hair and a handwritten note. "This is only the beginning." The security footage had been wiped clean. The garage attendant remembered nothing. The vehicle tracking system showed the car had simply vanished. Alexander reported the theft to his personal police contact, the same officer who had responded at the cafe. The man promised to look into it, but his voice lacked conviction. Something had changed. The officer seemed nervous. When Alexander called his father to complain, Victor Wang was uncharacteristically short with his son. "Handle your own messes for once," he snapped before hanging up. Alexander didn't understand what was happening. His world had always been predictable. He acted without consequence. His father cleaned up any problems. The system bent to accommodate his desires. Now suddenly that certainty was eroding. The ground beneath him felt unstable. He didn't know that at that exact moment, Jinwoo was sitting across from Melissa Chun, an investigative journalist who had been trying to expose Wang Industries' labor violations for years without success. Every source disappears. Chun was explaining, spreading her documentation across Jin Woo's desk. Every whistleblower gets scared off. Every investigation hits a wall of legal obstruction. They're untouchable. Jin Woo examined her evidence, photos of chemical burns similar to those documented at notorious factories in countries with no labor protections, testimony from former employees about 16-hour shifts without breaks, medical records showing elevated cancer rates among long-term workers. No one is untouchable, Jin Woo said quietly. You've been trying to fight them in the light. Some battles must begin in darkness. What do you mean? Chun asked, studying him with both wariness and hope. I mean that Victor Wong didn't become a billionaire by following rules. We won't defeat him by following them either. Jin Woo slid a thumb drive across the desk. This contains access codes to Wong Industries' private servers, financial records, communications, evidence of tax evasion and foreign bribes. Chun stared at the drive. How did you get this? This is illegal. So is what they've been doing to your sources. Jin Woo's voice remained even. The question is not how I obtained it, but what you will do with it. I could be prosecuted for using illegally obtained information. You could be. But first, they would have to admit these records exist. And doing so would confirm their authenticity. Jin Woo leaned forward slightly. Sometimes, Ms. Chun, justice requires courage. As Chun left with the drive hidden securely in her shoe, Jin Woo received another message. His contacts had located a Wong Industries warehouse that didn't appear on any official records. Power usage suggested significant activity, but no business was registered at that address. That night, Jin Woo personally led a team to reconnoiter the warehouse. Phantom moved silently ahead, his training making him virtually invisible in the darkness. The security was extensive but focused outward, designed to keep people from escaping rather than preventing entry. Jin Woo's suspicions deepened. They disabled the perimeter alarms with practiced efficiency and entered through a service door. The interior was divided into sections. The front appeared to be a legitimate electronics assembly operation. The back, separated by a reinforced door with biometric security, was something else entirely. When they finally breached that door, Jin Woo's expression didn't change, but his hands curled into fists at his sides. 37 women and men worked at assembly stations, their movements mechanical with exhaustion. Sleeping pallets lined the walls. A makeshift kitchen and bathroom facilities indicated they lived here. Armed guards patrolled the space. The workers didn't even look up at the intrusion, their spirits broken by whatever threats or violence had reduced them to this state. Among them, thin and pale but unmistakable, was Keisha, Shayla's missing sister. Forced labor. In America, in this gleaming modern city, the Wong family had recreated the sweatshop conditions of the darkest corners of the global economy. Jin Woo gave hand signals to his team. Within minutes, the guards were subdued, the workers were being led to waiting vehicles, and evidence was being documented and collected. This would not be handled through traditional law enforcement, not yet. These people needed protection, medical care, and safety before they could become witnesses. As Jin Woo helped Keisha into his car, she clutched his sleeve with skeletal fingers. There are others, she whispered. Other warehouses. They move us around when inspections come. They take our identification. They said they'd hurt our family if we tried to escape. Jin Woo nodded, rage building behind his carefully controlled expression. They will never hurt anyone again, he promised her. By morning, all trace of the operation had been erased. The workers were secured in safe houses throughout the city. The evidence was being compiled, and Jin Woo was preparing for war. The first strike came from an unexpected direction. Melissa Chun published her exposé, backed by the internal Wong Industries documents, revealing decades of financial crimes, environmental violations, and labor abuses. The story was picked up by national outlets. Wong Industries stock plummeted 15% in a single day. Victor Wong issued immediate denials and threatened lawsuits, but the damage was done. Government agencies that had long looked the other way now faced public pressure to investigate. Politicians who had accepted Wong donations suddenly found reasons to distance themselves. The second strike was more personal. Alexander Wong woke to find his penthouse infiltrated overnight. Nothing was taken, but something was left. Photographs of him with underage girls, evidence of drug use, recorded conversations revealing casual admissions of assault. These were placed on his breakfast table alongside a cup of steaming coffee and another note. Your father cannot protect you from what comes next. Alexander's panic was complete. He tried calling his security team, but no one answered. He tried his father, but the call went to voicemail. He tried the police contact, but a different officer answered, informing him that his usual contact had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. For the first time in his privileged life, Alexander Wong felt truly alone. That afternoon, Jin Woo received a call from Victor Wong himself. I don't know who you are or what you want. Victor's voice was controlled but strained. But you're playing a dangerous game. This is not a game, Jin Woo replied. This is consequence. Name your price. Everyone has one. Not everyone, Mr. Wong. Some of us still believe in principles. Principles? Victor scoffed. You break into my properties, threaten my son, steal my proprietary information, and talk about principles? I talk about people held captive in your warehouses. I talk about workers exposed to toxic chemicals without protection. I talk about families threatened and exploited because you believe they are powerless. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. What do you want from me? Victor finally asked, his voice quieter now. Justice. Don't be naive. What does that mean in practical terms? It means I want everything, Mr. Wong. Your empire, your freedom, your son's accountability, the safety of every person you've exploited. And I will have it all. Jin Woo ended the call and turned to his lieutenants. They will attempt to eliminate us now, he said matter-of-factly. Double security on all safe houses. Move the witnesses hourly. And prepare for the final phase. That night, the assassination attempts began. Professional hit teams targeted Jin Woo's known properties. They found empty buildings and waiting defenders. 3 attackers were killed. The rest were captured. Jin Woo had anticipated this response, had planned for it, had set traps within traps. But Victor Wong had resources beyond Jin Woo's estimation. The second wave targeted Jin Woo's legitimate businesses, setting fires, destroying inventory, threatening employees. This collateral damage was harder to absorb. Innocent people were being harmed now. And then they found Shayla. Despite Jin Woo's precautions, despite the security he'd placed around her hospital room, Wong's men located her. They didn't kill her, that would have been merciful. Instead, they injected her with a cocktail of drugs that left her comatose, her prognosis uncertain. When Jin Woo received this news, something shifted in him. The cold, calculating strategist gave way to something older, something forged in the crucible of his youth. Before he was a businessman, before he was Jopik, he had been a soldier trained to eliminate threats with extreme prejudice. The time for measured response had ended. Bring me Alexander Wong, he ordered. Tonight. Phantom sensed the change in his master. The Jindo moved closer, pressing against Jin Woo's leg, offering silent support. Jin Woo rested his hand on the dog's head, drawing strength from the creature's unwavering loyalty. We finish this now, he told Phantom softly. Alexander was extracted from his panic room with embarrassing ease. The state-of-the-art security system proved inadequate against Jin Woo's specialists. The young billionaire was found huddled in a corner, reeking of expensive whiskey and cheap fear. He was brought to Jin Woo's private office blindfolded and terrified. Please, Alexander sobbed when the blindfold was removed. My father will pay anything. Millions. Billions. Whatever you want. Jean Wu studied him from behind his desk, Phantom sitting alertly at his side. Do you remember Shayla Johnson? Jean Wu asked quietly. Who? Alexander's confusion was genuine. The waitress whose hands you burned with coffee. The woman whose life you destroyed for your momentary amusement. The waitress? This is about a fucking waitress. Alexander's fear momentarily gave way to incredulity. Do you know how much money my family has? We could buy and sell thousands of waitresses. Jean Wu didn't respond immediately. He simply pressed a button on his desk. A screen descended from the ceiling, displaying footage from the warehouse raid. The workers' haunted faces. The deplorable conditions. Keisha's emaciated form. This is about much more than one waitress, Mr. Wong. This is about hundreds of lives your family has destroyed. This is about a system that allows the wealthy to treat humans as disposable resources. Alexander stared at the footage, his expression morphing from confusion to horror as understanding dawned. I didn't know about that, he whispered. That's my father's business. I just party and pour coffee on innocent people and assault with impunity and consume the wealth generated by suffering without ever questioning its source. Jean Wu's voice remained level, but his eyes burned. Ignorance is not innocence, Mr. Wong. Not when you benefit from the suffering. What are you going to do to me? Alexander's voice cracked. Jean Wu stood and walked around his desk. Phantom followed, silent but watchful. I'm going to give you a choice. The choice your victims never had. Jean Wu laid 3 items on the desk in front of Alexander. A gun, a USB drive, and a legal document. Death by your own hand, or complete testimony against your father's operation, with evidence, or transfer of your entire inheritance to a foundation for the victims. You can't be serious. Alexander looked between the items in disbelief. I'm always serious, Mr. Wong. Unlike you, I understand the weight of consequence. My father will kill me if I testify against him. Then you understand something of the fear your victims lived with every day. Jean Wu stepped back, giving Alexander space to consider his options. Phantom sat between them, his amber eyes fixed on the young billionaire with predatory assessment. How do I know you'll let me go if I choose to sign or testify? You don't. Trust is earned through action, not guaranteed by promises. But I give you my word, cooperate, and you will live. Your life will change irrevocably, but it will continue. Alexander stared at the items, his hands shaking. For the first time in his life, no amount of money or influence could shield him from his choices. No father would sweep in to clean up his mess. No system would bend to accommodate his privilege. Why are you doing this? He whispered. Because someone must. Because there must be limits to power. Because in this world, there are those who consume and those who are consumed, and the balance has tipped too far. As dawn broke over the city, Jean Wu's phone rang. It was Victor Wong. Where is my son? The elder Wong's voice was ice. Making the first meaningful decision of his life, Jean Wu replied. If you harm him, he is safer with me than he ever was with you. Your parenting created a monster, Mr. Wong. I'm offering him redemption. You'll never win this, Victor growled. I have judges, politicians, law enforcement. Had. Jean Wu corrected. Past tense. Check your news feeds, Mr. Wong. The federal indictments are being unsealed as we speak. Your offshore accounts have been frozen. Your board of directors is calling an emergency meeting to remove you. Your empire is crumbling. The silence on the other end was profound. You still don't understand who I am, do you? Jean Wu continued. You saw me and made assumptions. You thought I could be intimidated through conventional means. But I am not conventional, Mr. Wong. I am the consequence of a system that forces good people to become something else to survive. What do you want from me? Victor's voice had lost its edge of confidence. I want you to come alone to your main factory at noon. I want you to see what your greed has created. And I want you to face your victims. When Jinwoo hung up, he turned to find Alexander staring at him, the legal document in his trembling hands. I'll sign it, Alexander said hoarsely, and I'll testify everything I know about my father, about the business, about the bribes and threats. Everything. Jinwoo nodded once. Then your journey to redemption begins today. At noon, as instructed, Victor Wong arrived alone at his factory. Instead of Jinwoo, he found federal agents, state police, and a crowd of media. Alexander was there too, flanked by protective officers, his face haggard but determined as he publicly turned against his father. Jinwoo watched from a distance as the empire fell. Victor Wong, handcuffed and raging, was led to a police vehicle. The workers from the warehouse, now recovered enough to testify, stood silently in a line, witnesses to justice long delayed but finally delivered. Phantom pressed against Jinwoo's leg, a solid presence grounding him in the moment. We did what was necessary, Jinwoo told the dog quietly. In the hospital, Shayla began showing signs of emerging from her coma. Keisha sat beside her, holding her hand, whispering encouragement. The sisters would have a long recovery ahead, but they would face it together. 1 year later, the Wong Empire was dismantled. Victor Wong received a 30-year sentence for human trafficking, racketeering, tax evasion, and dozens of other charges. Alexander, in exchange for his testimony, received a reduced sentence of 5 years and surrendered his entire inheritance to the newly established Survivors Foundation. The foundation, administered by former victims including Keisha, provided support for workers, legal assistance, education, and rehabilitation. Its headquarters stood on the site of what had once been Wong Industries' main factory, a symbol of transformation. Jinwoo observed these changes from a careful distance. His own organization had evolved, focusing more on legitimate protection and less on activities that operated in gray areas of the law. He hadn't become a saint. The world still required guardians willing to step into darkness when necessary, but he had found a better balance. In his private office, with Phantom lying contentedly at his feet, Jinwoo examined a news article about the Foundation's latest initiative, a program training service dogs for trauma survivors, with Shayla as its director. The photograph showed her smiling, her once burned hands now strong enough to hold a leash connected to a black Jindo puppy, Phantom's offspring. Jinwoo allowed himself a rare smile. In a world of blurred lines between justice and vengeance, between protection and power, he had found his purpose. He would continue to walk the edge between light and shadow, between legitimate business and necessary intervention, between the man he had been forced to become and the man he aspired to be. The powerful would always exist. The vulnerable would always need protection. And Jinwoo Kong would always be watching from the corner booth, ready to rise when others remained seated, ready to act when others looked away. Two worlds will always exist, he told Phantom as he folded the newspaper. The world of those who believe might makes right, and the world of those who know that true strength lies in defending others. He reached down to scratch behind the dog's ears. We may walk in shadow, but we do so to protect those in the light. In downtown, at that same cafe where it had all begun, Shayla served customers with steady hands and a genuine smile. She wore a management pin now. The cafe had been purchased by an anonymous investor and transformed into a worker-owned cooperative. No one treated the staff as disposable anymore. And in a corner booth, Jinwoo occasionally sat, drinking his tea, watching over a small piece of the world he had helped to balance. Not as a savior, not as a conqueror, but as someone who understood that true power meant ensuring others could stand on their own. Some debts can never be repaid, he once told Shayla when she tried to thank him. Some actions require no thanks. We do what is right because it is right, not because of what we receive in return. She had understood. They both knew what it meant to live in a world of transactional relationships, where everything and everyone had a price. They both knew the value of something freely given. And in this understanding, a unique alliance had formed not of culture or background, but of shared principles, of recognizing that justice, true justice, required both the light of public accountability and sometimes the shadows where Jinwoo operated. "You changed everything," Keisha told him during a foundation board meeting. Jinwoo shook his head slightly. "You changed everything. I merely removed obstacles." But both knew the truth was somewhere in between. Change required courage from all sides, the courage to stand up, to speak out, to fight back. And sometimes it required someone willing to be feared in order to protect those who could not protect themselves. As Jinwoo walked through the city streets, Phantom at his side, he thought about power, how it flowed, how it corrupted, how it could be channeled for protection instead of dominance. He thought about Alexander Wang, who might emerge from prison a changed man or might not. He thought about Victor Wang, whose empire of exploitation had been built on the belief that some lives mattered less than others. And he thought about Shayla, who had lost so much but refused to be defined by victimhood, who had taken her pain and transformed it into purpose. In the end, that was the most powerful form of justice, not just punishment for the guilty, but restoration for the harmed. Not just tearing down systems of oppression, but building something better in their place. Jinwoo would continue his watch from the shadows, but people like Shayla would lead the way into the light. If this story moved you, show your support by subscribing now. Share with someone who believes in justice. Comment below what you would have done in Jinwoo's position. Remember, sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't who you expect. It's the quiet one watching everything. ***.